Hello and welcome to my first Patreon video. We're going to do this chickadee painting with birch trees. So our finished painting will be similar to this. Not going to be exactly, of course, but it'll be pretty close. So first of all, I'll just go through what we're going to use. You want your canvas, of course, and a little easel, something to cover your table with. Then I use just some paper towel, and you'll want a couple foam plates, or if you prefer to buy a palette, you can get one of those that you reuse. You just tear the sheets off. It doesn't take a lot to start painting. You don't have to wait until you get all the professional supplies. You can make use of a lot of things you have at home. So you won't need a ton of brushes. We're going to use basically maybe 3 main brushes. A 1-inch brush. I'm using Royal and Langnickel brand brushes from Michaels. This is an angle brush, but again, not necessary. I also have a square, the same, not an angle. Either one will do good. I like using angle brushes, so I'm probably going to use this one. And then I'm probably going to use maybe like a 1/2-inch flat brush as well. That one's an angle too. I got them on sale. The brand of this is Liquitex Basics brushes. So I'm going to use probably a 1/2-inch one, and I'm also going to use a number 4 round brush. So you don't need a ton of brushes. For paint, I'm using Liquitex Basics brand. So I'm using titanium white, phthalo blue. I'm going to use a little bit of light blue violet. I'm going to use burnt umber. And I'm going to use a little bit of burnt sienna. Also, you just need a standard black. I'm also using a carbon black. So basically for this painting, you need white, brown, blue, and black. Don't worry if you don't have these exact colors. As long as you have a white, a blue, a brown, and a black, you can still complete this painting. So just gonna wet my brush. I have my paints poured up. Gonna wet my brush, and I'm gonna drag a little bit of blue and brown together. And I'm gonna start at the top edge of my canvas. And we're going to fill our entire background in first using a combination of these colors. So blue with a little brown, and now I'm just bringing a little white into it. You'll notice with me painting, I don't tend to overbrush my canvas. So as I work my way down, I'm not going to kind of brush and brush and brush and brush and brush until everything blends together. I'm gonna let it be different shades in different parts of our painting. So here you can see blue and brown up here, some white. You can see some more brown parts here, and then maybe it gets a little blue again. I'm gonna just touch in a little of that light blue violet. Light blue violet, such a nice color. And this just gives another kind of color to our background. I tend to go for more colorful paintings. And guys, you'll see, like I said, different shades of color. I'm not over brushing, and you'll also notice I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time kind of nitpicking my background. for the simple fact that it's our background, it's not our focal point. We're gonna cover a lot of this up anyway. So just as long as you use your blue, brown, and white, fill out your canvas. Make sure you have a little bit of water on your brush. If you're getting your white speckly canvas come through, you may need to thin your paint out a little more. So that's just a touch of water on my brush. Go back to my palette and start adding more paint. Your brush should glide across your canvas. If you feel like you're scrubbing your brush to try to cover, you're either using your paint too thick, you need to thin it out, a little dip in your cup of water will do that, or you're just not using enough paint. Some people are really skimpy with their paint and you're not gonna get that coverage that you want. So I've lightened it through the center. Now I'm just gonna start deepening again as I get down near the bottom. So essentially our canvas should be a little darker on the top, a little lighter through the middle, and then as we get down to the bottom, we're gonna go ahead and help that kind of deepen up again. So we'll end off dark. Little dip in my cup of water. Sometimes I'll just pick a little bit of paint up, like then brown, and I just kind of go over what I did, letting it blend right on my canvas. A little more of that lilac color. And more blue and brown to kind of deepen us as we get near the bottom. My paint is pretty thick, so I'm doing a lot of dips in my cup of water and come back to my palette and let that paint kind of get a little thinner so it spreads a little easier. And I always tell everyone that's just learning to paint and you're a beginner, kind of in the early stages, guys, every now and then, just kind of look at your canvas, kind of move to the side of your canvas a little bit, and just see if you've got any thick ridges or lumps and clumps of paint left, especially for your background. Later in the painting, we're gonna want thick paint for some of our detail work, but for our background, we don't want any real thick parts because it takes a lot longer to dry. So guys, at this point, our background is done. You can fan it with a paper plate if you want. If you have a hair dryer, you can just give it a little blast with your hair dryer just to kind of help it dry a little. So you can go ahead and pause the video if you want and dry your background. That will help you then start to layer on your next paint. So the next step of our painting, we're gonna go ahead and move to a little bit smaller brush. So probably a 1/2 inch. I have a 3/4 inch brush here, but I'm gonna use a 1/2 inch. That's my 1/2 inch angle brush. Like I said, doesn't have to be an angle. It can be just a straight flat brush. And I'm gonna mix a little white and black together. On my palette, I want a deep charcoal gray, not jet black. I want a charcoal gray, and you're gonna want a little bit of water with this to help it thin out a little bit. And I'm gonna do some of our background tree limbs with this charcoal gray. So I'm just gonna start, I usually start at the top of my canvas and just come straight down. Actually, not really perfectly straight. You can come on a bit of an angle. Again, this is part of our background, not our focal point. So we're not gonna nitpick them too much. Then I'm just gonna turn my brush on its edge so it makes a finer line. I'm just going to add some small branches out from that. So these are just trees that are kind of back in the distance. If you are more comfortable pulling your limbs in, then do that. Or if you want to start by the tree and pull them out, just remember a tree limb gets narrower as it moves out. It's wider at the base usually. It's wider where it connects to the tree trunk. And I would stress, don't go over these too much. Your paint's fresh underneath. You don't want to start pulling off the paint underneath. So this one, my background trees are going to be laid out a little differently than in the example painting, and that's okay. Still the same concept, but you know, when you're painting, make it your own. You don't have to do it exactly like I'm doing, and that's kind of the beauty of learning to paint, is finding your individuality. So if you watch some of my videos, like, they'll definitely help you get started. But I totally encourage people to do your own thing. If you want something a little different, if you want to move it in a different spot, please do so. Some beginners get kind of too worried and caught up with trying to replicate things to be identical, and you kind of lose the fun then. So don't worry about that. If it's different, that's a good thing. I was never scared when I was first learning how to paint. I made so many mistakes, and you know, but that was the fun of it, and that's how I kind of built confidence. I wasn't hard on myself if things didn't go my way. I thought, oh well, okay, I'll try another one. I'll start over. I'll do a different one. I'll try something else if this didn't work. So guys, that's our background trees. So they may look a little black to you there, but they're actually a charcoal gray. So I'm gonna fan this for a minute. Again, another good time to just kind of give it a blast with the hairdryer. I'm not gonna wait for mine to be perfectly dry. It doesn't matter if it's perfectly dry or not. So for the next step, so we've made this kind of charcoal gray here. I'm gonna use that, but I'm just gonna pull a little more white into it. I wanna make a lighter gray. Normally I wouldn't hold it up like this, but I want to show you guys. So I'm just gonna use what I just had, and I'm just gonna make a lighter gray. This will be the base for our big birch trees. So I'm back to my 1-inch brush. And again, if you don't have a 1-inch brush, do it with a 3/4 inch, do it with a 1/2 inch, it's okay. Use what you have. So I've got this kind of lighter gray now. So now I'm gonna pick where I'm gonna put my birch trees. So I know, and you know, that's the thing about this, we're gonna end up covering a whole bunch of this, but that's just the way it goes. So I know I'm gonna have one maybe about here. And just cover right over what you just did. That's the fun of it. You can cover anything, usually. Black is really hard to cover depending on the paint that you're using. So if you're using a cheaper paint, like a dollar store brand paint or something like that, you may find it a little more difficult to cover like I'm doing. The brand I'm using, Liquitex Basics, they're great for beginners. They aren't an overly expensive brand of paint. You can probably pick up the tubes. You can get them at Michael's. You can order them online. You can get them Amazon or Curry's art store online. Like $7 maybe for a tube, but it'll last you a nice while. And you know, the quality is good for what we're doing. I have probably every color that they make. I have a ton of them. So I'm gonna do 2 on this one. And then this one, I may go about right here. And I'll make the one on the left just a little bit narrower. So there's our 2 birch trees. So yeah, just keep in mind, guys, depending, you can do this if you're just starting out and you're practicing and you want to do it with like a cheaper brand paint. Totally fine, go for it. You'll probably have a great painting, but you may need to really let it dry in between your layers if you're going to use like a cheaper brand of paint. So just keep that in mind. You can do it, but it may take a little more paint and a little more time in between your layers. So now I'm going to do some black branches. We want to have a couple branches that our chickadees will go on. So I think this time I'm going to have my chickadees in between these 2. And the other painting I have one on the outside, one in the middle. But it doesn't matter. You can do however you want. Just kind of keep in mind, if you want to put 2 little chickadees in this, you need to leave a branch for them. So I'm just gonna use pure carbon black, straight black. If you have Mars black or lamp black, I think is another one, I'm not even sure. Either one is fine. Just you wanna use just a solid black. I'm using a 1/2 inch flat brush, and I'm going to make more branches coming off these big birch trees now. So I turn my brush on its edge and you can make a smaller line. And if your paint is too thick, again, use a little bit of water and thin it out. These are going to be a little bigger because these trees are a little bigger. Already I can see our painting is starting to come together. I'm doing the branches now just so I give my first layer on my trees just a little chance to kind of dry and stuff. What I'll do, I'm gonna do my outside branches, then I'll do my detail on my birch trees, then we'll add our branches in the middle that our chickadees will sit on. I always make my branch a little wider where it connects up to the trunk. And just remember, don't overbrush too much. We're layering paint here, and if you overbrush, you're gonna pull off what's underneath, and then you're gonna get a little mess. A hair dryer is your friend. In between layers, give it a blast with the hair dryer. It'll really help you. So I'm gonna go ahead and do the detail on the trees next. So first thing I'm gonna do, I'm gonna highlight the right side of my trees. So I'm gonna use a 1/2 inch brush, flat brush, and just our white paint first. And I'm going to brush up the side of my tree with my white paint. And when I pull it across my tree, This is what will give us that birch tree look. But you're gonna want to give a little curve. So see that little curve I'm giving to my brush stroke. And what that does, that gives us the illusion that our tree is round. Because if I just started pulling it straight in, it kind of makes it look flat. But if you kind of curve your brush strokes a little bit, a little roundness, it gives us the illusion of the tree being round, which is what we want. So that's one side. What you can do when you're doing that, go ahead and turn your painting. It's a little awkward if you don't. I didn't do it for mine, just for you guys so that you could see easier what I was doing. But if I was here by myself and not recording, I would probably turn my canvas on its side. So I'm just gonna go up this tree. I just kind of dab a little white on, then I pull it over. My gray underneath is still wet, so it's mixing in a little with that, which is okay. Everything kind of mixes together here. What I'm gonna do later, I'm gonna touch more white back later. So that's the start of it. Then from the right side of my tree, I'm gonna pull across some brown and gray. And maybe a little hint of black or white too, but we're gonna keep the right side of our tree darker. So for that, we're gonna use some of our burnt sienna as well. So I'll just squeeze a little, dab it on my plate, and you'll notice like a little bit of paint goes a long way. I probably won't even use all of that. I'm gonna go back to my same brush. I just gave it a quick little rinse in my cup. Pat it on your paper towel so it's back to its old self. And I'm gonna use a little gray and a little burnt sienna on my brush at the same time. So see the gray I was using there with the white. And I'm just gonna dab a little burnt sienna and even a little bit of black with that. And then I'll just start coming from the left side of my tree and pulling it from that side. And that gives us that kind of coloring of a birch tree. So again, it's the gray with a little bit of white with it, a little more white, and a little bit of your burnt sienna. Do some parts a little darker and some parts a little lighter. It doesn't all have to be the same. It looks good if you do some parts darker, some parts lighter. They're starting to come together. So next, I'm just rinsing that brush quickly again. I'm gonna use a little more white again now. And I'm just gonna go back over some of that white again. So again, with our 1/2 inch brush and just white paint. And I'm just gonna touch a little more now, letting it stay pretty thick. Re-dip your brush often. I want to keep those brush strokes. I like seeing the thick brush strokes. And we'll do it on this one too. again, I would turn my canvas again now probably. It's a little bit of an awkward way to brush it on for someone that's right-handed. So feel free to flip your canvas around, turn it, do whatever you need. Notice I kept the white all to one side. So now we're gonna figure out where our little chickadees are gonna go. I think I'll do 2 on the same branch maybe. So I'm gonna go back to my 1/2 inch flat brush and just black paint. I'm gonna do a branch just right about here, and it's gonna overlap the tree on the left. Connect it up to our birch tree. Give a few smaller branches coming off. I'm gonna do another one here, I think. Things can overlap, things can touch. It's okay. Okay. So now I know where I'm gonna put my chickadees. The next thing I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna give my little bit of black detail to my birch trees. So still using my 1/2 inch brush, pure black paint. I'm just gonna start touching little dabs on my birch tree to give those little black marks that we know they have. Redip your brush often. If you want to draw your tree in between, you can. You can give it another blast with your hair dryer if it's still really wet. Now our little chickadees, first thing we are going to do, we use a little, this is a flat 1/4 inch flat brush. So that's what I'm gonna use first. So the first thing I do with my chickadees, I just do them in a really light gray. So again, it's just our white paint with a hint of black. So it's a very light gray, not white, but just a light gray. And I'm just going to, I'll do one here so they get a little round body, and then they get a little round head overlapping the body. Just do them all in gray first. These chickadees, they're not going to be highly detailed because this is a beginner friendly painting. But what I might do, may do another chickadee painting, just because I love doing them. There's something about a chickadee, so adorable. I may do another chickadee painting more detailed, where we really get into the feathers and like his eye and stuff like that. But for now, we're just gonna make two little chubby chickadees. They're not gonna have a huge amount of detail on them. I'm gonna let those just kind of dry for a couple minutes. And what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna go ahead and add the snow and the branches. So guys, I'm gonna be adding, and my branches are still wet, but I think I can do it. If you want, just make sure your black is kind of dry before you do this. When we're adding our snow, you're gonna let your paint stay thick, because then when it dries, it's still nice and bright white. And please don't over dab. Just do a little bit and stop. If you have the urge, which it's hard sometimes, but if you overwork it, you're gonna turn all this nice bright white snow gray. And we don't want gray snow. We want it to stay nice and bright white. So you'll notice as I'm doing this, I'm not brushing. I have a lot of paint on my brush, and I'm just gently dabbing it on in the corners where like kind of snow would gather up on our branches. Don't over brush. Sometimes learning to paint is also a lesson in self-restraint. We always want to keep going, and then sometimes we do, and it's like, oh darn, I can't take it back now, I've gone too far. So don't go too far. Do a little bit, take a step back and look at it. A little bit on our branch. Little bits of snow kind of gathered on our branches, not overdoing it. If you get some black in your brush, give it a quick rinse, a little pat dry, and start again with your white. Don't try to cover. If you kind of get too much and it gets a little gray, just stop and leave it till it dries and then go back. If you try to cover wet paint, especially the white, you're never going to get that white back if it's wet. So just stop, dry it with your hair dryer, or leave it, walk away for a little bit, and then come back. Okay. So I'm going to add the black to my chickadees now, and I'm going to do that with that same 1/4 inch flat brush. Again, it's the same brand I've been using, Liquitex Basics flat brush. It's a number 2 flat, which is a 1/4 inch. And we're going to take our black. So now we need to find his wing. So where his head meets the body, I'm going to make a little black line kind of dabbed across. Actually, before the wing, I'll do his head. So a chickadee has a black head and a white cheek. So we're going to just dab our black paint all the way around his head, and we're just going to leave that cheek opening there. And with that little 1/4 inch flat brush, I'm just going to give him his little beak, just a little point there. And that's as much detail as we're going to do on his face, on his head, the black. And then we're going to dab his wing down, and we're going to give him a little tail down here. So he's starting to come together. Like I said, this is a beginner friendly. We're not going to get into too much detail. We're going to highlight his chest feathers and his cheek in a minute. So we'll do the same for this one. So just come around his head, right across where his head meets his body. And we'll do that little beak. And then we'll do his wing. You only see one side of the wing because they're not facing us straight on. And you can give him a little tail there too. And I'm just gonna rinse that brush for a second. I'm gonna pick up just white again now. And we're just gonna brush, so I'm gonna stay with my 1/4 inch flat brush and a little bit of white on that again. And we're going to just brush a little on his cheek, little white cheek. And then we're gonna start on the front of his belly or his breast. And we're just gonna do little brush strokes, letting it kind of blend in with the gray a little bit. So his outside of his breast is highlighted, nice and white. A few little dabs is all you need. You don't have to brush and brush and brush. Not necessary. These are not highly detailed, like I was saying. And then chickadees usually have a little bit of brown on them too. And we're gonna do the brown right kind of where the wing meets the underside of the belly. And I'm just putting a little white, same brush, my 1/4 inch flat, a little white and a little of our burnt sienna together. And we're just gonna do a few little dabs up the belly, and that's enough. Same on this side. There we go. And I'm just going to touch a little bit of white down his little tail. Just a little white. There we go. So that's as detailed as I'm going to get with the birds for this one, guys. So beginner friendly, kind of a little abstract look to our chickadees. That's enough detail for a beginner. If you want to dab a little more snow right under his belly, the tail comes out from behind the branch. A little bit of snow, and they're sitting on a snowy branch. So the last thing I'll do for this painting, we're gonna have little snowflakes everywhere. If your paint is really thick, take a brush, doesn't matter what one, and just some clean water, and just make a little puddle of slightly runny white paint. So I do that by a dip in my water, back and forth, 2 or 3 dips in your water, and mix it around with your paint. So my paint's a little runnier. And then I just take a tiny brush, it doesn't matter, anything at all, just something with a small end on it. And we're gonna use the end of our brush, doesn't matter what one, just a little one. And you put white paint on the end of your brush, not on the bristle part, and it makes a perfect snowflake. And we're gonna do these little snowflakes over our entire painting. And you can do as many as you want. A lot looks really nice. Like a wintry, frosty, snowy day. If you don't want it to be a winter scene, you can leave the snow out. That's okay too. You can do whatever you want. This is your painting. No one can tell you it's right or wrong. And that is our chubby chickadees in the birch trees. So guys, thanks for watching my first Patreon video, and I will be doing more. Keep an eye on my page. Thanks guys, have a great day.